I remember going to church with my mother in Texas and going to the Mormon church, and we would walk there, and it was a really happy time for my mom. I remember learning to like cut beans or peas or whatever. Snap peas, yeah, in Texas. I mean, when I retire, maybe we can move there. I don't know, but I can afford it. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, my mom always loved that. And then I remember when I was a little kid, I had dead teeth in the front from falling, and so one of them, they wouldn't come out, and so my mom's friend Isis and I, they tied a string to my tooth and it popped out. I didn't even know what was going on, but it was gone. And but it was kind of a fun way. My mom loved playing the piano, and she loved being in Relief Society. My mom actually was a convert to the church, and from the story I remember, and maybe my brothers can correct me, but they lived in a house on Fenwood, and it was not too far from here. And she had like a real pretty turquoise house, if I remember right. But one night, this man ran into their house, like the block wall or something. And this man, he was a member of the church, but he was also an alcoholic. And so he introduced the church kind of like to my mom. It was kind of like a miracle kind of deal. But my dad had been raised in the church, but had not been active. And so, but because of this man and his fellowship, and he turned his life around, it really made a difference for my mother. And then my parents were kind of active, and then they went to Texas, and I think they were active. But then in 1962, my grandfather, my mother's only child, so my grandfather got sick with lung cancer. And so we moved back to San Diego, and my dad at the time, and I really had to put myself in my mother's shoes, because here she was an only child. She had a mother who had kind of some mental issues. She had her father who absolutely adored her, and he was sick, and she couldn't fix it. And then she had two little kids, and she had me, who I had eye surgeries, and I was sickly a lot, and so it was a lot on her plate. And then there was a friend named Bud who would come and help out, and they was a friend of my parents. And Bud is on the back of the program. I don't know who the lady is, though. I need help with. Maybe some of Mom's friends or my uncle will know who that is. But I remember my grandfather died on my brother's birthday. My brother was 1 year old, and it was like 1962, so I was maybe five years old. And we moved back to Huntington Park, or Los Angeles. And at that time, it was like the social unrest with the Watts. We were actually living in central Los Angeles off of, I think, Central and Firestone, I think is where it was. And I remember as a little girl, my grandmother loved to go shopping, and I don't think my mom liked it as much, so I ended up going with my grandmother a lot on the red car going up to Los Angeles. But my grandmother, she really, really had a really hard time after my grandfather died, and so she had a mental breakdown. And I remember my mother having to deal with all this, and I know it was like her friend Bobby and other friends who knew my mother really helped her a lot. And I remember going to visit my grandmother outside of a mental hospital, and eventually my grandmother got better, and she would help my mom as she could with the kids. And then Mike came in 1964. He was a gift. And at that time, they found out I had a hearing loss. And so then I got to go to a special school and take a little yellow bus. And I remember it was right after Mike was born, and I missed the bus. And I had to walk back home, and my mom had just had him, and she got in the car and she drove me to school. I knew not to miss the bus again. But my mom, after I had my eye surgery and stuff, she was there. She would take me to eye therapy and all kinds of things like that. She was very creative. She loved to sew. she made, one of my favorite dresses was an orange dress. It was just really bright, and she stayed up like all night making it one night. She would also do what she could do to provide financial means for the family. So she took in ironing, and she did things like that. She made a really dynamite potato salad. She just was really good at that. And she loved her friends, and she was such a good listener. She, you know, you save your drama for your mama. My mom was a really good listener. And there was a time in my life where my mother really had a really hard time. And she, sorry. I have to keep clearing my throat so I can stop crying, because that's the trick. Anyway, so my mother in her 40s, she was not very happy, and she had depression and stuff like that. And so she, I ended up leaving the house, and it wasn't a good situation. And but it was probably the best thing that happened to me, because I think it made my mom change her life too, because then she started going to church after that, and it was members of this ward who really reached out and touched my mom and tried to help her and deal with a lot of things. And after that, she had like a second renaissance, that she was involved in primary. She played the piano. She even was in Young Women's for a little bit, and she just loved serving with the sisters, and it was really, really sweet to see that. And she would come to my kids' baptisms, and she had to really push herself a lot, because sometimes she just wasn't, she had that depression, and it was hard. And my husband, I remember one time, it was really, my dad called me, I think, because she was so depressed, and I had to, literally, Dave and I got her out of her bedroom, and I got her into the ER, and got her back on medication, and she snapped out of it again. She's really resilient, and that's one thing that I admired about her, is like, no matter how dark it was, she could still, you could just feel this aura of love. And then Christmas time, I was not in California, I was in Iowa with my kids, my other kids, like Jared and his wife and our 3 little grandboys. And my friend Vicki, she went to visit my mom on Christmas Day. And she said my mom was so happy. And she sang songs with her. And she said that she could feel the spirit, and that my mom was at peace. And that was the hardest thing for me, is like, I always wanted to try to help my mom and fix her and make life better the way I thought it should be, as it would work for me. But then I also knew my mom loved me in her own way, even though she didn't, it might not have been how I wanted it. And that's what I learned one night with my dad when I came back from a Kaiser, when he was really sick. And I had the spirit tell me, he says, you know what? He said, your dad loves you the best way he knows how. Might not have been what you expected, but it was the way it was. And I had to learn to, and it was like I felt this burden released from my shoulders. It was like, you know, my mom had choices, and she made these choices. But I wanted to leave you a message too, where my mom worked really hard. She would sometimes get panic attacks, and she'd make herself still go to work and keep going. She had this strong will that was very, really hard. And as I was reading this morning, and some things as I was getting ready, this thing I found that was my mom had made when she was a little girl. It says, "Dear Mother." And I was reading in this instant here something, because I've been really struggling with this. And it's kind of like my mother was talking to me. When the Savior he's the master healer. He has the power to change our hearts and give us permanent relief from the sorrow caused by our own sins. When the Savior taught the Samaritan woman at the well, he knew about her serious sins. However, the Lord looked on the heart. And I found this morning. I wasn't looking for it. And he knew she had a teachable heart. When the woman came to the well, Jesus, the embodiment of living water, is simply, "Give me to drink." Our Savior will likewise speak to us in a voice we recognize when we come to him, for he knows us. He meets us where we are, and because of who he is and what he has done for us, he understands, because he has experienced our pain. He can give us living water when we seek it. He taught this to the Samaritan woman when he said, "If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water." Finally understanding, the woman responded in faith and asked, "Sir, give me this water." And then she went forth and did better things. And so the Master Healer can also comfort and strengthen us when we experience pain because of the unrighteous actions of others. And there's many times as we struggle in life, we have to really turn it over to God, because he's the one that will relieve the burdens. And that's what I felt this whole week. Because I felt like, once again, I tried to swoop in and help, and it didn't, I was too late. And I felt a lot of guilt about that. But then I realized, my mom's work was done. And I think we need to have faith in the power of the atonement and have forgiveness. And lastly, the Master Healer, Jesus Christ, can comfort and sustain us as we experience painful realities, mortality, mental illness, disease, chronic pain, and even death. My mother received the light of hope in a time of intense suffering. She had a faithful visiting teachers, friends, and her sons who loved her, and then in their own way. They each loved her in their own way. And that is the one thing I want my brothers to know. I want you guys to get along. I feel like I've been the one. There's pictures of me, and you always see me like this around my brothers. We were all baptized the same night, and our lives took total different directions. But one thing that's kept me going has been my faith in God. And then the Marker family, Mike Atkinson, and the Marker line that comes from LeVar and Mildred, my husband and I, and my kids are the only ones that stayed true to the legacy. And the other thing that happened too, after my grandmother died, her visiting teachers came to me and said, "Your grandma wants you to do her work for her." And it was like she knew enough to tell somebody who would tell me, and I did it. But I also knew Grandma had a choice. And even when I did her work in the temple, I could tell she was still picking against the pricks, is a word you use. She wasn't quite ready. But hopefully now she knows that life is so short, friends. You've got to love the people around you. You've got to serve them. And I'm going to miss my mom, but I know I have my mom's friends. And it helped me so much in my life. And I appreciate her friends. And I appreciate my girls. And I'm so grateful for the faith and testimony that I received in these hallowed walls in this building. They really made a difference for my life. And I want you to know how much I love that you came here today, and that you know that my mother's in a good place. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.